Okay, so today, like I said, I'm going to talk very briefly about virtual aesthetics and their reception. This is a very classical, art historical subject, and one that is often recurred when people start to develop new medias, such as virtual works. I would like to start with a quote by the renowned art historian Margaret Olin, who states, "Visual arts are not made in hermetic isolation, but as a form of communication." Owen's analysis of photography focused on the power of looking and its impact on artwork's reception. Today, I shall continue Owen's analysis beyond the medium of photography and into the reception and communication of virtual works. To do so, the central praxis shall revolve around my own reading of Maurice Merleau-Ponty and his phenomenological reasoning, particularly his work, The Phenomenology of Perception. Ponty's work studied the way in which people comprehend the world around them as an immediate sensory experience. Working outwards into larger conceptions, it has thus been used repeatedly by art theorists to come to terms with the reception of art, particularly in space. In this manner, the conclusions and arguments preceding are neither culminative nor summative, instead proposing methodology through which virtual works are received by viewers. This is what I like to term a materialist understanding. Much like to understand sculpture casts, we must first understand the limits of plaster. I suggest plaster fails structurally, and in doing so, virtual environments fail in the generation of spatial experiences. Unlike Olin's consideration of photography, however, virtual environments are therefore situated in and creators of space, complicating notions of reception as flat screens are simultaneously viewed in 3 dimensions. I'm not looking to question the intended effects nor reason for artists' interplay with virtual environments, rather suggesting this mode of analysis for which we can understand how players look at them. Broadly separating my talk into 3 sections, tracing the experience of a single art exhibition through different virtualities, from a physical space, through interactions with augmented reality, and culminating in the virtual environment of Fortnite that you see before me. The primary subject of this talk is the exhibition New Fiction by the arguably infamous American artist KAWS, or Brian Donnelly, which took place at the North Serpentine Gallery between March and January 2022. He included augmented reality works and obviously uploading it onto Fortnite. This exhibition is emblematic of how artists are starting to use and interplay with virtual environments. You may have noticed my use of the term viewer and player. These are deliberate choices to clarify a lexicon in which the agency and the position of those looking at the art are in question. So, to turn to the physical exhibition, KAWS filled the gallery with his familiar blend of plastic and pop cynicism, as the cartoon-styled characters enact a set of melodramatic, fragmentary narratives across the gallery. Due to limited time, I shall focus on the sculptural works that he used. For instance, Family, which you see on the left-hand side of the screen, consisting of 4 characters, or companions, as KAWS termed them. Family is reminiscent of cultural icons such as Mickey Mouse or the Cookie Monster. These post-1970s re-renditions of pop art tropes and aesthetics have been noticed by the Marxist historian Julian Stollebrass to convey the economic complexity of the contemporary art world. While there is much to say about the work's socioeconomic commentary, or lack thereof, it goes beyond the remit of this presentation, instead focusing on viewers' reception. We can date viewers' reception of works to around the 15th century in written history, with the writings of Leon Augustus Alberti, who said that to view a painting was to view a window into another world. It wasn't until the 20th century, however, that perception and reception can be said to come to the forefront of artistic discourse. Maurice Merleau-Ponty's discussions revitalized the New York art scene after its 1959 translation from French into English. Ponty's esoteric text suggests that it is the perception in its prime form that teaches us true objectiveness. With this focus on vision and perception, Ponty struck a chord with the minimalist sculpture of the period and prompted a renewed interest in the reception of form. One of these artists and theorists was Robert Morris, whose notion of the presentness, that's a technical term, of an artwork situated viewers' perception in the gallery space. Artworks like the ones on screen were for Morris more than instants of perception, but instead, reading from Kant's critique of pure judgment, he situates their perception temporally in both time and space. Viewers' conception of these objects were based entirely from an attempt to remove perception from the ravages of time, so that the objects could be truly and completely comprehended formally in space. We can see how for a sculptural movement that was playing with notions of form, surface, architecture, the simple structure could, if viewed for an extended period of time, just be a little bit boring. However, in sculpture with multiple figures, dimensions, and recessions, like family, or more traditionally Bernini's Apollo and Daphne, as seen on the left, it is more difficult to generate a notion of the entire object in a single image. Rather, the space and form of the work is vital to its reception. Due to the work's complexity, viewers can be understood to comprehend the work through a coalition of multiple perspectives. For instance, moving to the rear and sides and front of Apollo and Daphne, the viewer is presented with 4 distinct emotions and narratives, telling the story of Apollo's pursuit of Daphne and her eventual freedom from his advances by being turned into a tree. From the top left to the bottom right, we can see that the statue displays love, lust, rape, and salvation. Although these divergent emotions and narrative points are separate, we as viewers are capable of unifying them within the instance of the sculpture. In this manner, viewers could be said to map the artwork, collating ideas into a single image, in a manner similar to the neuroscientist Sylvia Wirth's outlining of the cognitive faculty of mapping, or cognitive mapping. Wirth suggests that people come to understand the space around them through a combination of immediate experience and cognitive memories, that artworks are mapped in ideas of space and time as comprehension of the object is created from both immediate phenomenological perception and cognitive experience. Following, when stood to the back of family, viewers are capable of remembering and contemplating the now obscured faces and other elements of the figure. Thus, within a conception of cognitive mapping, we can grapple with both the immediacy of Morris and the phenomenological viewing of Merleau-Ponty, in which viewers combine various visions into a single map of the artwork. For those aware of Ponty, you may be questioning how I've managed to combine his anti-empirical stance with Wirth's neuroscience. And to do this, I suggest that both are necessarily phenomenological endeavors. They both look to express how we see things. Merleau-Ponty provides very little explanation of how we actually view, and thus cognitive mapping provides us with the process of viewers' perception of objects. It is based on a tripart construction of space between the viewer, the object, and the gallery space, as we can see on the diagram, that I term the artistic site. This suggests the space in which viewers stand or view, even though I hate to repeat that word, and in this space they respond to the art. It is on this cognitive site that we map things cognitively. Okay, I'm acutely aware I may have blasted through that, and there's some quite complex things going on. So to quickly recap, I have argued that viewers respond to physical objects through their unity in time and space, in memory and perspective. These properties are intrinsic to the artistic site, as viewers map the artwork, the gallery space, and their own position through perception and memory. This cognitive process requires, as Morris suggests, the agency of the viewer as they apply their body and movement into the perspective of the work. Progressing into the digital environment, KAWS worked with the Acute Art Company to render various companions in augmented reality. The app allowed gallery visitors to place characters at specific locations, such as plinths and wall mounts, whilst also allowing viewers outside the gallery to render a limited section of companions anywhere. Viewing the newly visible objects through a handheld video screen, the work would react to changes in viewers' position and movement, procedurally altering the AR work to create the illusion of a physical object. Thus, viewers could be interpreted to respond to the works akin to physical environments. On the contrary, I suggest this simplifies the mediated nature of the AR work, working philosophically too close to the infamous notions of the suspension of disbelief. Viewing the work through a video screen is vital to its reception, such that the physical world beyond it is not forgotten or superseded, but acutely present in the viewer's mind. Trying to avoid questions around a material epistemology, I suggest AR work is understood by the viewer as transposed onto the physical environment. Rendered by viewers, independent of physical location, the AR work is only ever generated in respect to its surroundings. In this mode, the artwork could be said to appear as a blemish on the viewer's perception of the physical space beyond, both visibly present but knowledgeably transient. An experience similar to wearing tinted sunglasses. Your perception of the world alters, but only for the period in which the glasses are worn, and you're acutely aware that at some point you will take them off. Transposed onto the physical space in this manner, viewers are permitted to enlarge, move, or redirect works. Here we see a companion positioned on top of the 18th century listed gallery building. The anachronism and inconsistency in scale, position, and solidity, a work of this size would likely just fall through the lead roofing of the building, appears to undermine the sense of space in the AR work, for questioning its position on the artistic site. Likewise, viewers maintain the capability to delete, recreate works, which necessarily alters the time of the object. Here we see a pedestal without an AR work. The perception is questioned by these changes of durability and the persistence of the object's visibility. The tangible image of the work questions the unity of time, as viewers may not perceive the work for that long or necessarily engage with it as an object, perhaps viewing AR simply as a novelty. Thus, AR works complicate mapping of the artistic site as they fail to persist in a full objecthood in perspective and memory. Instead, the works are conjured and dispelled routinely and inconsistency. The removal of the object from cognitive mapping questions whether the faculty can account for any changes. Wirth suggests that despite a continual change in immediate perception, cognitive mapping through an accordance between perspective and memory allows us to continue, in that if a building is knocked down on a street, you're still aware of the street and the things around it and its situation in space, despite its visual changes. Such that despite changes in form, number, duplicity of AR companions, viewers are capable of recognizing and responding to the artworks. This being said, AR works maintain the capability to be proliferated and repeated across space, in some cases leaving the physical space beyond the screen completely abstracted. The blemish is so great that the works immediately upend our perception of the physical space beyond the screen. For instance, if the work in the bottom right-hand corner there was real, cars would simply just crash. This is not to say that AR sculptures avoid faculties of space and time entirely. They do retain a sense of a semblance of the objecthood. Instead, they toy with these unities. The AR works produced by KAWS, like most AR works, appear to prevent a traditional conception of cognitive mapping. Toying with notions of space and time, AR works must be comprehended differently by viewers. Losing the spatial notion of the object reduces the artistic site to 2 points of reference, such that there is no longer an equal interaction between the tripart of the artistic site. Daniel O'Sheil has suggested that this phenomenological distances the viewers from the AR work due to the inconsistency of digital reproduction. O'Sheil's analysis, I suggest, however, focuses too much on what AR as a medium lacks, rather than its positive qualities. The companion rendered in front of you is still perceivable and interactable. Just because it has the ability to change doesn't mean that it introduces a sense of fear or abject. Instead, the work is perceivable. Thanks to KAWS' use of acrylic in his sculptural works, the companion on screen almost appears physical if it weren't for me telling you that it weren't. Its perception is, however, reliant on physical space. The camera lens must be functioning properly and acutely, and what it views is what renders the AR work as understandable. The AR work's inability to be separated from the physical space suggests that the viewer's artistic sight is more reliant on the space in order to comprehend the work. Thus, rendering a phenomenological experience of AR not between the pure vision and fantasy, a lie, but as a media experience within the artistic site. If you would turn your attention to the diagram, the cognitive mapping of the artistic site is mediated by this AR blemish. The visual blemish conjoins the player to the space upon which the object appears to be situated. Therefore, the artistic site is no longer purely a player's or viewer's cognition, rather than as an agency granted to the physical space in its virtual perception. To quickly recap, the implications of AR the work becoming understood as a blemish rather than a distinct art object between the viewer and the gallery space alters the artistic site. No longer is the physical space imposed on by a receptive viewer, rather the AR work appears within a physical space entirely inseparable from it. Corresponding to the introduction of AR, Fortnite, which is a strange artistic medium, I'll grant you, also entails a number of changes for viewers. Players within the gallery can no longer move around the space, instead limited to a standard gaming setup, whether that be a mouse, keyboard, controller, or other haptic interface. Moving around the digital environment, players also view in the third person, a development that I will return to in a moment. I would like to suggest, however, that despite these changes in the interaction, the mode in which players comprehend the artworks remained cognitively similar to that in AR, such that viewing through a computer screen, players experience a three-dimensional spatial world, and in doing so, form various cognitive maps in the artistic site. However, there are aspects of agency that necessarily alter an artistic perception. Like most objects in Fortnite, the companions positioned outside the gallery could be broken, destroyed, shot, bashed, or even blown up. The feeling of just shooting things when bored in a video game is a state I'm sure a lot of us can relate to. It is important to note, however, that the walls of the Serpentine Gallery were not breakable, and neither were the works contained, therefore producing no discernible difference between the object and the gallery in the virtual world. In this manner, the virtual blemish can be understood to have become a stain, a complete and whole rendering of an object in an environment. Nevertheless, the companions still appear distinct from the gallery walls, their bright colours contrasting with the white plinths and brown bricks. In this manner, the virtual gallery and the digital works appear not to be differentiated. Whilst this may be true for cursory glances, I would suggest a more specific consideration of the virtual gallery is less simple. Rather, the artistic site for the virtual environment is not constrained to the internalized objects. For instance, how many times have we all marveled at the beauty of Skyrim, Spiritfarer like we did a minute ago, or even Pac-Man, perhaps more during this conference than we have done previously? Still, not unlike AR blemishing, the wider spatiality of the virtual environment and the works included are necessarily comprehended as an aesthetic single object. This is not to say that we don't discern particular objects such as paintings or wall hangings or statues in a courtyard when playing games, but that there is a lessened difference between the gallery space and the objective space. As such, every view of the computer screen is an aesthetic instance. Players comprehend simultaneously the screen and the spatial environment. Like Alberti's window into another world, the virtual environment, if understood frame by frame, is a series of paintings that are both cohesive and singular, but necessarily a believable three-dimensional world. Merleau-Ponty, in his reading of Husserl, suggests, in the contained spectacle image, players must experience this dual perception simultaneously. In doing so, the artistic side appears collapsed. The objective and the gallery space are no longer wholly distinct, but one and the same. This coalition reduces the player's artistic site as objects, space, and the player's space collide. With this in mind, the formulation of cognitive maps by players are altered. Moving in and around the virtual environment complicates the notions of objects' temporality. It consists in both time and space, but only upon the screen. The prominent affect philosopher Brian Masumi, referring to the cognitive scientist Albert Makote, suggests movement as a faculty to engender experience has the ability to survive the removal or transition of objects, such that when undermining objective time and space does not prevent viewers from forming cognitive maps in virtual worlds. Although Masumi, like Merleau-Ponty, speaks from a philosophical tradition of non-Cartesian dualism, in which the mind and body are a single experiencing phenomenological identity. Within the medium of Fortnite, however, the body is moved, the body of the player is digitized, viewing in the third person and therefore producing a different visual relationship. The agent body, the one that moves within the work, is also part of the visible phenomenon. Therefore, the phrenological perspective of the player cannot be solely based in their digital movement around the space as they map cognitively, instead being viewed simultaneously as an object and an environment. Each image of the digital work becomes an aesthetic and an artwork in its own right. This has pertinent implications when considering the medium of Fortnite as a game. Like all video games, these spaces are implicitly already created with interiorized maps and views that are designed to induce particular responses. This might be better explained through a comparison to a more narratological game, such as Fallout 4. The opening sequence from the pre-apocalyptic life through the falling of the bombs, only to emerge from the vault into the destroyed wasteland, is designed to introduce a sense of pathos, perhaps even despair, in the player. Likewise, new fictions intend to produce similar, albeit aesthetic, responses in players. Outside the gallery, players are confronted with larger than life, or correction, larger than avatar structures and sculptures, only to progress inwards to find ever smaller versions. In this manner, the player experience follows a curated framework of views and instances that ready them for an aesthetic, preconceived reception. The cognitive map is pre-designed or pre-digested, and in this manner the viewers appear not to interpret the virtual world, but to reinterpret or reabsorb a pre-existing sense of cognition. Thus, players fail to create a fully physical, quote-unquote, artistic site of virtual artworks, as virtual environments are dispersed through both windows, but also as independent aesthetics. The coalition of the sense of these objects inverses Morris's account of the artistic reception based in viewers' agency. Instead, virtual environments create viewers' reception in and of the work itself. That is to say, that players do not understand the work on their own terms, not entirely, but that the work has an agency in understanding how it is viewed itself. This presentation has not sought to analyze the effects of the virtual transition, but to suggest one way in how viewers' reception changes. I've just outlined one method by which the virtual environment can be seen to alter players' perception of virtual artworks, as the environment directs its own reception. However, I do not suggest this to be the only way in which players relate cognitive across virtual and physical spatialities. New fictions in Fortnite operated in a primarily visual medium, preventing other haptic involvements, which will continue to change how we view artworks. In doing so, KAWS altered how players relate to companions and virtual entities, perhaps to increase the digital footprint and commerciality, as KAWS himself states that as virtual entities, as KAWS himself states that the work blew up on social media, a conclusion that necessarily increased sales for the artist. The objective of this presentation was to create a materialist conception of virtual environments and to understand how the artistic medium received. In order to do so, I have traced viewers' receptions of art across virtualities, considering how the player sees each object, both in itself and within the gallery space. Focusing on the artistic site as a reflective mode that is altered by changes in spatial relationships of objects, I've outlined how AR as a virtual medium impresses a greater onus on the gallery space for reception. Precedingly, in a completely virtual environment, new fictions guided and created experiences of KAWS works. It is my hope that this methodology not only influences my own thinking, but proposes further rumination over the power of virtual environments aesthetics. For instance, the success of both KAWS and Fortnite exposed thousands of players to the exhibition. The agency and power granted to the virtual environment to guide viewers is both a benefit and a boon. Firstly, in that the virtual environment has a distinct power to make viewers engage in ways selected by artists and creators, perhaps in ways that other artistic mediums lack. Conversely, it raises ethical questions about the power of subtly enticing viewers to experience perhaps hurtful emotions. For instance, the video game of Senua's Sacrifice, or the installation piece of She Keeps Me Damn Alive by Daniel Braithwaite Shirley, both pitted players against anthropomorphized mental health issues. Although these works also rely on the nature of virtuality as a medium between installation and experience, I have only touched on the reception of single objects, primarily sculpturally, in these matters, and I do question how other works would be different. I think the largest question that I would like to answer is what would have happened if the Serpentine and Fortnite had allowed all of their players to blow up all of the works, and whether that changed how much we valued them. To conclude, I've demonstrated one way in which players' receptions to artwork alters across virtual divides. The virtual mediums appear analogous to plaster in that they shape a cognitive mold that crafts our experience of the artwork. Artworks uploaded into virtual mediums alter how players understand and view each object, the medium becoming increasingly controlling of players' reception.